and welcome to this Tuesday panel discussion sponsored by the Unity Church of El Cajon. My name is Susan Jarboe, and today I'm here with several friends, Kathy Cronin, Kristine Pass, Karen Downy, and Reverend Linda Burdett. Our topic for today is called emotional equilibrium. And as you can imagine, it comes from one of my favorite fellows, Richard Rohr. The reason I was interested in this is because when I was a girl, my mother would say to my sister and me, "You girls are so emotional." And I kind of grew up with that. And so I wanted to find out more about emotions. But before we get into that, let's have a prayer. Heavenly Parent, we come before you today in humility and faith. We thank you for all you have given us and the many blessings in our lives. We ask for your guidance and strength. Show us the way and fill us with courage and wisdom. Help us to remember your love and grace and to be faithful in our service to you. Give us the patience and understanding to face life's challenges with grace. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Richard Rohr suggests how we might honor our emotions without overly attaching to them. And when my mother said that my sister and I were so emotional, in some ways she was saying we are too attached to our emotions. When it comes to honoring our emotions, we have to say both a strong yes and a strong no. We must begin with yes, because so many of us were trained by family and religion to not feel our feelings. They thought they were doing us a favor because they didn't want emotions to rule our lives. Unfortunately, that gave a moral connotation to even having feelings, not just the negative ones like anger, resentment, or fear, but the positive ones too, like pleasure, happiness, and even desire. The overt or subliminal messaging, "that's wrong, that's bad," stunted our capacity to appreciate and to suffer or to allow the full meaning of reality. Emotions are, first of all, a gift from God so that we can touch reality by a way other than our brain. And I'd like to give another personal example here. When I was a girl, uh, I took a plane to see my grandmother, to visit my grandmother. And it was the first time I'd been on an airplane. And my parents and I were waiting in the terminal for the plane to load. And my mother looked at me and she said, "Why aren't you more excited? If I were you, I'd be jumping up and down." And what I realized thinking back on this event and others is that my parents, and as Richard Rohr says, our religions, were telling me when it is appropriate to have what kind of feeling. And I was inside, I was excited. I was eager to go on a plane and experience my first plane ride. But I guess I just wasn't showing it enough to make my mother happy. And that's kind of ironic given that on other occasions, she said, I was so emotional. Now, Richard Rohr cites a pastor, Peter Scazzaro, and I had to look him up and I realized he was famous. He is a pastor, author, and thought leader, best known for pioneering the emotionally healthy discipleship movement. And I'll ask my panelists later if they've ever heard of that. A framework that integrates emotional health with spiritual maturity. He and his wife, Jerry, launched this ministry to address the disconnect they observed between deep spirituality and emotional well being. And he has written several books: uh, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, The Emotionally Healthy Leader, and Emotionally Healthy Relationships. And so this is an excerpt from some of his works. Like most Christians, I was taught that almost all feelings are unreliable and not to be trusted. They go up and down and are the last thing we should be attending to in our spiritual lives. It is true that some Christians live in the extreme of following their feelings. It is more common, however, to encounter Christians who do not believe they have permission to admit their feelings or express them openly. This applies especially to such difficult feelings as fear, sadness, shame, anger, hurt, and pain. And yet, how can we listen to what God is saying and evaluate what is going on inside when we cut ourselves off from our emotions? To feel is to be human. To minimize or deny what we feel is a distortion of what it means to be image bearers of God. To the degree that we are unable to express our emotions, we remain impaired in our ability to love God, others, and ourselves well. Why? Because our feelings are a component of what it means to be made in the image of God. To cut them out of our spirituality is to slice off an essential part of our humanity. And now we're back to Richard Rohr and his comments. Because emotions were so repressed and denied and thought to be always faulty, it's probably one of the major reasons we moved into overly heady Christianity. We're rediscovering the value of emotions now, but this has the danger of swinging the pendulum to the other side, assuming that emotions are always right, always good. But when taken at face value, emotions don't have any cognitive balancing. We aren't asking, is that a sensible response? Is that a reasonable response? So we have a lot of sentimentality and drama, the pumping up of emotions about nothing. We spend hours creating outer dramas, particularly when there's no inner drama, no inner aliveness or contentment. Inside the frame of the smaller self, we tend to make everything a big deal. I'd like to ask the panel to comment on the themes or thoughts in this. I'm interested in how you all were raised to deal with emotions, or how you were taught to think about emotions.
I'll start. That raised a flag here and there. Um, One thing I wrote down was to feel is to be real. And something that kind of is going on in the world today is for me looking out, it's like, who am I? Of course, this has kind of been a question, ongoing, the authentic me. And then that all ties into um, all of the feelings. And being raised, I was raised Catholic, so we didn't feel or think. You shouldn't be thinking that, or you shouldn't be feeling that. And I remember, oh my God, and you couldn't be angry. And the only angry one I really knew in the household was my dad. But then he would say he wasn't angry, but you could see the blood rise up in the head. So I learned to not be authentic with anything. And there really wasn't any role models doing anything in the house I lived in. I just have to tell a quick little joke, but it's not really a joke. Um, my brother, one time, my dad was having one of his anger attacks, and I think he was after my brother. And we had a circle. There was the living room, then the dining room, and then my parents' bedroom, and the hall, and then back into the living room. And then we had a mantle and fireplace. And of course, the Holy Bible was on the fireplace. But if you were raised a Catholic, you couldn't open that because the priest is the one that would tell you what was in the Bible. Anyway, my dad, I believe, was chasing my brother. And so what he did is, boop, he pretended like he ran into the fireplace and crashed on the floor. And it dismantled the anger immediately. But it's like, still, anger. I mean, I don't like angry. I don't feel like feeling angry, but I can go, okay, what is it? What do I need to look at inside myself? And so if something out here's what I think is making me angry, it's like, okay, I need to take a deeper look and see what's going on inside myself. And I don't know, to me, there's religions and religiosity, and then there's spirituality, and the two have nothing to do with each other. And that was, I think, one of the first things that I learned when I got into 12-step recovery groups in Al-Anon. It's like, what is spirituality? I had never even heard that word of getting out of the head and the judgments of everything and the have tos. You got to do this to be that. You got to feel this way, all this stuff, and get into my heart. And, I never really learned any of that stuff early on. It's kind of like the older you get, the more I learn each day. But being authentic and acknowledging all of our emotions and feelings doesn't mean I have to act on them, but I do have to acknowledge them. And especially, I know different times when I've been in a battle with depression and somebody would say, oh, well, you don't need to feel that. You don't really feel that way. That's a negative emotion. And it's like, bullshit. I feel it. It hurts. And I'm doing something. And it's also hard to admit things like, yeah, I am angry. It's like, oh, it's like, doesn't mean I have to do something, but I do have to acknowledge I'm the sum total of all this, and I can be authentic about it. And I think it does take a lot of years, for some of that awareness to come. Thank you very much for that topic. And I'm going to have to message my brother and ask him, do you remember the day you ran that you staged the fall? It definitely diffused the anger real quick.
Thank you, Karen. Who's next?
Susan, I think that you and I must be related. When you talk, there's so many times where you talk about the things that, from when you were young or your reactions now. And I'm like, oh, yes, I relate, I relate, I relate. And this is one of those areas. When I was growing up, for me, I was a very bubbly child. And everyone that met me just adored me. I was one of those children that brought light into a room. Didn't understand that until my cousin had a child who did the same thing. And it did not matter what was going on. When that little girl walked into a room, you felt good. So suddenly I understood what it was that people were talking about with me. And I mean, gosh, in elementary school, I even had the nickname Bubbles. Made sure it got stopped by the time I was in high school because, I didn't need to sound like a stripper. But was that I used my smile and that bubbly personality to cover a whole host of negatives. There was so much going on. You don't talk about what goes on in this house in public. And so much of this is, you are, my maiden name was Sign. So you are a sign. And that name carries meaning. You're expected to act like a sign. And so it took years and years, and like Karen talked about, for me to find authenticity, to be able to say, no, it is okay that I have high highs and low lows. It's perfectly fine. It doesn't make me bad. It doesn't make me flawed. It just makes me different than other members of my family. And this idea that authenticity has and is a power is something I didn't learn until I was reading Jess Lair. And I know we talked about this particular book before. I ain't much, baby, but I'm all I've got. That's the moment for me. Reading that book was where I found out, oh, there is a power in being authentically yourself. On Tuesday we had our spirit group, and Linda and some of the others that were there, we were talking about that flow state and the peace and how it comes from not resisting, not having shoulds, and all of these things. And to me, this plays into the emotional attachment to things as well as the emotional release from things. That when we are authentic and we allow our emotions to be what they are, we're in that flow state. And it's the most beautiful way to live. So this has been an interesting topic. Thank you, Susan, and thank you to Karen for your input.
Thank you, Kristine.
I'll go next.
Okay, Kathy.
So I think I have so many thoughts when you get talking about emotions, and took me back to my childhood. And I was one of these emotional kids that I can remember at times we'd watch Lassie, and there was a scene where Lassie maybe got hurt, and I would be just bawling. I was so upset, and I'd have to leave the room, and my family laughed at me about how emotional I was over this whole thing. And it was sort of like, so then in time, because I was made fun of being emotional, about feeling other feelings and seeing things and people being hurt and things like that, that just really bothered me. Then I got to the point where it was like I didn't want to be made fun of, so I started to harden myself. And then my mother started to nickname me Hard-Hearted Hannah, because I would just, try to shut down those emotions of not letting people know how I felt about things, because I didn't want to be ridiculed for being so emotional. And that side of it, I was also that very similar to what Kristine said, is, I was this vivacious. I was the youngest in the family, and I was just very vivacious. And, I was out there. In fact, I was the kind that talked all the time. That's how I got the nickname Chatty Cathy, and it was sort of like I was, outgoing and wanted to have fun and do these fun things. And it was like along the way, you just do these things, but people shut you down for being like that, because it's like, you're being childish, or you're, whatever they could criticize. So it was through those years of always being criticized, whether I was being too emotional and tearful, or I was being too chatty, or I was being too, outspoken, whatever it was, I was always being told I was wrong for being who I was. And I think the aspect of the authentic self coming out. And it wasn't until recently, while I was doing a webinar, that I learned that part of my thing is I'm an empath. I can take on others' feelings. I can feel what Jane may be feeling and that sense of that. And that was, as a child, that was sort of what it is. And that's why I have a hard time with TV programs that, it's sort of, or movies. It's like I take those things on, they come into me. It's like I can't watch an action film late at night because I will have dreams that will put me right back into the middle of that movie. So it sort of is like understanding that I'm connected by being an empath. I can be connected to others' feelings and feel what is, or I a lot of times put myself in their shoes. How would I feel if I were in that situation? And I sort of see it type of thing. So it's sort of like, yes, I have learned along the way is to control those emotions, to harden myself to it because it's painful. It's painful when you can feel others' feelings so much. And so it's sort of like you have to pull that curtain down. And for me, I had to just sort of that stiff upper lip, and like either I'm going to be criticized or it's like it hurts. It hurts to feel their hurt. It hurts to feel what they're feeling. So I just choose to not feel, and shut those feelings down. So now that I've gotten older, I'm like, what happened to that exciting, vibrant, lively child who was rambunctious and out there and enjoying life? Is like I've learned to sort of shut down those feelings, and I'm trying to claim those back now. Those are mine. Those are my authentic self and who I am. And this is a great topic to talk about those emotions, is that, it's like you're talking about your flight, your mother criticizing that Susan, that you should be excited about going on the flight. Well, if it's your first time on a plane, you're flying alone, you have mixed emotions with that. It's like you're excited about it, but you're scared on the same. And I said, it's the same thing that in a few weeks, my husband and I are doing a cruise across the Pacific. And I have a lot of, even though I've done a ton of cruises, this is the first time I'm going to be spending 5 days at sea in the middle of the ocean, away from land. And I'm a little anxious about the fact of what, happens if this ship has a problem and you're in the middle of the ocean. Or the other side of it is 5 days at sea. Am I going to go stir crazy, after the third day? And so I've got these mixed feelings. I'm excited about it, but then I'm a little anxious about it. And it's sort of like, even at this stage, it's sort of like, yeah, I'm a little anxiety ridden with this, trip coming up. So even now as adults, we have those moments that those emotions, that we are mixed feelings of being excited, but also nervous and things like that. It's a great topic. I love the fact that this was shared and how everyone shared, their emotional journey and finding their authentic self. And just, I think the key of that is being true to what your emotions are and being able to feel comfortable expressing it. I'm learning to do that with grace and ease and love. So with that, I will say I appreciate this topic, Susan.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for sharing. And I guess we all know who's next.
Me, pick me. I affirm that with you, Kathy. Absolutely. When you were talking, I realized, maybe for the first time, that most of the counseling that I've gone through personally have been around emotions. When I was growing up, my mother would steal my emotions. And I'll give you an example. I'd come into the house crying, something happened. And she would ask me, she'd say, "Why are you crying?" And I would say, "I'm sad." And she would tell me, "You're not sad. You just want attention." So for years, things would happen, friends would share stories, tragedies would happen, and I would start crying which would trigger this self-loathing. All this is going on, and I want attention because I seriously didn't understand my emotions. I didn't know what they were, and they were so confused and mixed up. Another piece, Susan, when you were reading, you mentioned desires as being an emotion. I pretty much learned not to show I wanted anything or not to want anything at all. And that tripped me up for years until I understood what I was doing. When I was growing up, anything that I wanted, that my family knew I wanted, would be used against me as a punishment and held over my head. Um, and most likely it wouldn't happen if they knew I wanted it. So I would dumb down the really exciting things in my life. And even now, super exciting things kind of give me a feeling of, I don't know, just kind of a pause, uh-oh, I really want this. And I think it's also messed with my ability to manifest. Like I said, I've had lots of therapy. I'm doing much better now, but the whole conversation of emotion is a good one. I will say I feel like that whole rocky road was a wonderful gift when I'm working with the children in my life. I am very quick to affirm their emotion and to approve their emotion. It's okay to be angry. You are totally entitled to throw a fit. Here's your room, throw your fit right here, but I don't tell them, don't throw a fit or we're not going or I'll take that away, because I know better and learn through experience. So thank you for the topic, and thank you all for your shares.
Well, thank you, everybody. And as you all were talking, I was taking some notes of things I wanted to comment on. One of the things that came up in your comments is telling people they shouldn't feel a particular way. And the person who says that may indeed be trying to be comforting and kind, but denying people their feelings is part of the problem, I think, that Richard Rohr is talking about, because then we feel as though there's something wrong with us to have the particular feeling that we have. Another thing that came up, and I think that with several of you, is that sometimes we have a disconnect between our outer display of feelings and the label we have on our internal state. And sometimes we do that deliberately. Like many of you commented on protecting ourselves. And so we put on a happy face or whatever it might be. One of the things I have found, and maybe some of you have had this, have you had people who say something to you like, I know how you feel, and they're wrong? It just amazes me how some people think they can read everybody, and that really isn't the case. Linda, your comment about your mother's comment on wanting attention kind of struck me in two ways. The first way, of course, was what a cruel thing to say. But then the next thing was, if she believed you wanted attention, why didn't she give it to you? Because here you were upset. And I I don't know. I just, to me, that is just a really cruel thing to say. And it says more about her, of course, than it does about you. I can't take the time to help you through this, whatever it was. And finally, Kathy, Your Lassie story struck me right here because that's how I am. I mean, I can watch a television program or see a movie, and people can be killing each other right and left, but I'm going to cry about the horse that got shot. And uh, I too, well, as you know, my mom said you're so emotional. I would cry at things like that. And people would laugh at me because I was crying, because I was taking it so seriously. I don't describe myself as an empath, but I do feel empathy for a lot of people who are suffering in this world. And I'm also very concerned about all the animals that are suffering in this world. And this is where Richard Rohr's concept of emotional equilibrium, I think, is so important because we have to have empathy for other people. And I mean, many of us are born with that empathy, but we can't become so attached to it that we become disabled somehow. And that equilibrium, I find to be quite challenging in this particular era in which we live. So you can see, I was really listening to all of your remarks, and it occurs to me that given the response to this subject, that maybe somewhere down the line, we could revisit it, maybe in a different way or a different slant. Is there anything else anyone would like to add? Excuse me, I needed a drink. Well, thank you very much, panel. And thank you to the viewers who have stuck it out until this point. And we welcome feedback on our subject matter, and you can provide feedback at the end of this recording. If you think this subject would be valuable for other people, give them the link. We welcome sharing our insights with anybody who might be interested. You can also become a subscriber, which means you would be notified every time a new posting goes up on YouTube. If you have ideas for us, subjects you would like us to consider, let us know that too. And at the end of the video, there's information about how to get a hold of us and how to get hold of the church. Also, we would love it if you would join us, even just once. Maybe there's something on your mind that you want to talk about. We would love to have you be a part of this panel, even if it's just once for a one-shot topic. We would welcome your participation. And of course, we would be delighted if you wanted to be a permanent panelist. And I can say from my own experience that it's a delight to work with the various people who have been a part of these panels. I hope that today's messages resonated with you in some particular way. And we are grateful that you have listened to us on this Tuesday. And please take care. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us, and let's stay connected and grow in spirit. We are on Facebook. Search for Unity Church of El Cajon and follow us and like our posts. You can reach us on YouTube at Unity Church of El Cajon. Please subscribe to our channel, watch our videos, and leave comments which can help us improve. We are on the web at unityofelcajon.org. Email or call our church office to receive our weekly newsletters, which lists all of our activities and opportunities to learn and grow together.